In part B, I'll examine in details the Arab-Israeli conflict and how it turned into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at the end of at the beginning of the 70s, in fact. In part B, we can speak about three wars. The 1956 Suez Crisis was also an Arab-Israeli war, so the second Arab-Israeli war. Indeed, as Israel tried to attack Egypt and get the Suez Canal, it attacked an Arab state first, Egypt, and it also invaded the Gaza Strip here, populated by Palestinian people. On this occasion, terrible massacres of Palestinian civilians by the Israeli army were perpetrated, and they are documented in this graphic documentary, which is very, very detailed and very, very striking, by Joe Sacco. He's an American cartoonist and a journalist as well. And if you can read that book one day, it will be very, very inspiring, I think. The 1956 war did not change a lot of things apart from raising tensions even more. The very, very significant war, which was actually a real turning point, is the 1967 Six Days War. In fact, it was sparked, I would say, by the Egyptian leader Nasser. Nasser, for years, he had tried to assert his leadership over the Arab world by proving that he was the true leader of the Arabs in their struggle against Israel. And in 1967, he made a decision that provoked the war. He decided to shut the Strait of Tiran, that would prevent the Israeli ships from reaching the Red Sea, as you can see there. And this immediately provoked a retaliation by Israel, which was in fact a massive attack by a very modern army against three states at once, against Syria, against Jordan, and against Egypt. And Israel won on all sides. The great, by importance I mean, the great impact of the 6 Days War was the occupation of Palestinian and Arab territories. Gaza became an occupied territory. The Israeli army was present there. The West Bank, what we call Cisjordanie in French, also became an occupied territory, and it is still the case today. The Golan Heights, very important, were taken to Syria, and it is still something existing today. And Sinai, the peninsula of Sinai, also got under Israeli domination. The other remarkable thing about this invasion and these occupied territories is that the situation was immediately condemned by the UN, and notably by the UN Security Council, so even the USA. The condemnation of the occupation was stated by a resolution. This is how the Security Council works, called Resolution 242. In this resolution, the members of the Security Council said that 1. Israel should withdraw from the occupied territories, and 2. the Arab states should accept the existence of Israel in return. That is called to recognize Israel. To this demand, the countries of the Arab League issued a declaration which went down in history as the 3 No's declaration. And they said, no peace with Israel, no negotiations with Israel, and no recognition to Israel. So you see, the situation was a total stalemate. Some pictures to illustrate the 6 Days War. I chose in the top left corner a picture of Israeli tanks in the Golan Heights. The reason why I chose that is that this occupation is often forgotten, and yet it is absolutely essential, because the Golan Heights, as their name suggests, are a hill which is in fact hosting the source of the Jordan River. So by taking control of the Golan Heights, Israel was taking control of the water reserves in this very arid region. It is absolutely an essential issue. The second picture that I chose is this picture of Palestinian refugees crossing a bridge completely destroyed by the war, and they are trying to cross the Jordan River to go to the state of Jordan, east of Palestine. I chose this picture because logically the 1967 war led to an even greater wave, in fact several waves of Palestinian refugees that fled to Lebanon or to Jordan in order to escape the occupation of the Israeli army. In the 1960s, in the late 60s, the conflict between Israel and the Arabs was strongly influenced by the Cold War. Indeed, the support given by the USA to Israel was really huge. They sent large amounts of aid, and notably of military aid, to Israel. And so on the other side, the Arab states were largely held by the USSR. The last Arab-Israeli war took place in 1973. It is remembered as the Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur is the holiest day in Judaism, so it's a very important day in Israel, a bit like Christmas or something like this. And on that day, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack because they wanted to gain back Sinai, the peninsula in the south. This was a total failure. Israel struck back, sent troops across the Suez Canal, so really demonstrated a huge firepower. The United Nations called for a ceasefire, and it happened quite quickly. But one of the reasons why this war is remembered is because, and that is a big picture alert, on that occasion many Arab countries, those who exported oil and that were allied in the OPEC organization, they decided to limit their production of oil in order to provoke the oil price shock, to provoke the sudden rise of the price of oil. And you remember that this had an impact on the global economy, and in a way kick-started the economic crisis of the 1970s that had all these consequences. We studied together. What the OPEC demanded on that day was, of course, the end of the occupation of Palestinian territories. The other important consequence of the Yom Kippur War was the change in the US strategy regarding the Middle East. Here the name of US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger must be coined, because Kissinger, who was already the Secretary of State of Nixon during the Vietnam War, chose a strategy known as Shuttle Diplomacy. Journalists named it this way because it illustrated the numerous travels that Kissinger made between the USA and different states in the Middle East. Because actually what the USA was trying to do was to serve as an intermediary between Israel and the Arab states. And the USA obtained some results in the sense that Egypt and Syria accepted in 1974 to stop threatening militarily Israel. That's the reason for this cover of Time magazine. Of course, the goal of the USA with this strategy was to divide the Arab camp, and it was successful. So, consequence, the name of the conflict changed, because it was clear in the early 70s that the Palestinians were almost alone against Israel. Here, this organization must be presented. The Palestinian Liberation Organization. It had been created in 1964, but in the early 70s it took a greater importance precisely because the situation had changed. Yasser Arafat, the leader of the PLO, became a very, very influential character at the global scale. He became the figure of the Palestinian struggle. And in the first place, the PLO, which was mostly stationed in Jordan, they tried terrorist strategies. I mean, what would be called terrorism by many people. In 1970, famously, they hijacked 3 planes from Western Europe and forced them to land on a place called Dawson Fields in Jordan. And well, I'm not sure it was in Jordan, but anyway. And they took some hostages, and then they destroyed the aircraft in front of the cameras of many international journalists. They did so because they wanted to promote the cause of the Palestinian conflict all over the world. They wanted to warn the world that this conflict still existed. Of course, it did not make the cause very popular in the West, but it had an international impact, and that is what terrorism is often about, actually. Even more famous was in 1972 the attack of some Israeli athletes during the Summer Olympics in Munich. Some athletes were killed on that day, and I'm just presenting an event that took place later in the chronology, just to illustrate how, in a way, PLO got successful in promoting a positive image of the Palestinian struggle. In 1987, they launched a strategy called Intifada, which means Wall of Stones, and many pictures were taken of Palestinian civilians, including very young people, children in fact, throwing stones to Israeli tanks. In terms of communication, propaganda, it was quite clever because it showed that the Palestinians were the weak in this struggle, and so it made the Palestinian cause a bit more popular, globally speaking.